Welcome to the third episode of Shipp's Tips. Now on this episode, I've brought you to a fantastic fishery called Todber Manor. It's near Gillingham, near Dorset. And I've actually brought you to the bottom lake or at Whitepost. Now this is off the main complex. We've got Todber Manor, which is about a mile up the road, but this is like the old original lakes. Very wary fish. Now today, we're in the height of summer, and we all know margin fishing is fantastic. And it's probably one of the biggest questions I get asked is how do you catch the fish when they come in the edges and they're very hard to catch? Well, that's what I'm going to try and do today. Give you all the tips and all the bait, everything I use to put these fish in the net. The first thing I want to do is mix with ground bait for fishing down this edge. Now, one of the base ground baits, you know, we're in the height of summer now, the fish are feeding, they're going to want some bait. Now, this is the way I do it. So obviously when I go to a match, it might be a bit different if you're a pleasure angler, but when I go to a match, my base mix has always been Matt's Method Mix. It's my favourite ground bait of all time. But we all know when the carp are feeding, especially down the edge, you know, it's very important you get your mix right because you can end up foul looking loads and loads of fish. So you want a stickier mix. So what I'm going to do is put like half a bag of Matt's Method Mix in. So I've got my bucket there. But I've got so much confidence with that, I always put it in, so I just love it. And if you're going to a venue with F1s in as well as carp, I think it's really important you put a bit of Matt's Method Mix in. Now, we've got another ground bait here. I use this a lot in the summer for edge fishing. It's called margin carp. Now it's got a lot of particles in it. So I'll just open it up and show you. If you look at that, you can see there's like bits of maize in there. It's such a nice ground bait because I add it to me Matt's Method Mix. So if I get to a match and I know I'm on a real good margin peg, I can just take a bag with me and mix it in. So I'm going to mix the whole bag. So I'm not messing about today. We all know at this time of year, you can feed a lot of bait and catch a lot of carp. So I'm going to mix them together dry. And adding that margin mix in, you get a lot of leeway to how much water. You know, I'm not going to, like on the other two episodes I've done, I told you how much water to put in the ground bait. On this episode, it's not about that. When you start adding margin carp, you can put a lot of water in and it won't you can't really mess the mix up. You know, just don't put too much in it to start, obviously. So I'm going to mix them two round like that. You can see all those bits in there. You know, they're heavy. This is what this margin ground bait's all about. It's about getting it down to the bottom. Even though we're only fishing in we're going to be fishing sort of 18 inches of water today, I want the carp to come in. I don't want it to sort of fluff up. And that's what that margin mix is all about. It's about being heavy, holding it down to the bottom and keeping the fish on the bottom. Now I've put like, there's about 2 and a bit kilos of ground bait in there. And I'm going to add about 2 pints of water. That holds about just over 3 pints, that container. You see, quite sloppy at the moment. Mix that around. And that margin carp takes a lot of water. You can have it dry, you can have it quite damp. I'm going to have it quite damp today to keep, you know, to keep everything down the bottom where I want the fish. So mix that round. Like I said, use a bucket every time. Use a big round bucket. Get into down at the bottom. Get all the dry ingredients. You can feel that. It was quite wet when I started mixing it. Now it's starting to dry out. Different mix to what we've used in the last 2 episodes. Completely different. Lots of particles. You know, heavy. I can feel that, and it feels really heavy. And the same with all my mixes. Now get back to my gear now. Set some gear up. Leave this for 15-20 minutes, come back to it, and if I need to, adjust it and then put it through a riddle. Right, I'm ready to go now. I've got all my rigs set up. I'll run you through the rigs and the lines and the hooks as we're fishing. But I've got all my particles here now. I've got my ground bait there. I've got about 3 litres of ground bait ready to go. I've pushed that through a riddle, which I always do with all my ground baits. And you can see from that, it's absolutely perfect. You can just it just sort of clags together. It's heavy. When you mix that carp margin, you can tell it's a completely different ground bait to a lot of the other ground baits that I use. Now, baits for the day, I've got some dead maggots, hemp, which is fantastic. You know, we all know how good hemp is for carp. It can keep the fish in your peg. I've opened one tin. I've also got another tin with me. Great bait as well is corn. Fishing down the edge for big carp, even bream and F1s, corn is great. So I've opened a couple of tins of F1 corn, but I'm not going to overdo it at the start down the edge. Don't get too carried away. I'm not sure what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do is put a few particles in my ground bait. I'm going to get a handful of corn, like that, a handful of hemp, and just a few dead maggots. I'm just going to mix that around in that first couple of inches of ground bait, like that. So I'm not mixing it all the way through, and I can just vary that as I'm fishing. So I've got a few worms in there just for the hook. We all know how I always go, never go anywhere without worms. You can just put a worm on the hook. You don't even have to chop them up, especially when you're fishing down the edge for big carp. So what I'm going to do is get me pot and just pot a couple of pots in down the edge. So I'm just going to fill my pot up like that. I'm not going to make a ball. I've only got about 18 inches of water. You can see in there, you've got corn, some maggots, little bits of hemp, but I'm not going to overdo it with the particles at the start. I'm going to use the ground bait to get the fish in me peg, and then obviously go through different hook baits to get the fish on the hook. Big fish, some of them, aren't they? Well, I've been fishing for around about an hour now, and I've caught quite a few fish and some of the big fish. But obviously the rigs are as important as what the bait are we're catching the fish on. So I'm going to run you through the 2 rigs, nice and simple, 2 rigs for fishing down the edge. Obviously heavy duty, it's summertime, I'm catching loads of fish and some big fish. I've got a 14 Dura Hollow elastic on, obviously very strong, you're catching lots of fish. And some of the fish today, you're actually trying to get over to the far bank, so you need a proper elastic on. The first rig I've set up is 019 power line. I've got one of my favourite little floats there, 4B12 Island. They're absolutely perfect for fishing down the edge. Nice and short, and a nice thick bristle to hold your baits. This is the actual rig I've set up for fishing off the bottom. It's not what a lot of people do down the edge, and it's one of the tips I can give you as we're fishing and show you actually how I'm catching the fish. Simple bulk of stots. And I got a 6-inch hook length of 017 power line to a size 14 XSH hook. So it's strong, you know, you're not going to get snapped up. Obviously we're catching lots of fish and some big fish. So that's the first rig. This is the rig, the second rig is the actual rig I started on. It's the same elastic, 14 Dura Hollow, 019 power line, the same float, 4B12 Island. And I've just got this bolt down literally like that down 6 inches above the hook. So I've got a 6-inch hook length, again 017 power line, 14 XSH, exactly the same as the other rig, but this is the rig I'm fishing on the bottom. It's quite deep. I've probably got 2 foot as tight as I can get to the bank, and it's quite awkward sometimes if you can't get into really shallow water. When you're putting ground bait in down the edge, they love ground bait, they're coming on it, but sometimes it can be really tricky to catch. But there you are, that's the 2 rigs. I'm now going to show you exactly what I'm doing to get these carp. Well, just now going to run you through what I've been fishing for about an hour, caught really well, but one thing's apparent is I've got to put a lot of ground bait in. They will not come in unless I put ground bait in. So what I've done, I've just actually topped me EVA bowl up with some more ground bait, but I'm not actually putting, maggots have been a waste of time today. It's either corn or worms. I've got a few maggots still left in there from the previous lot of ground bait, but I've got to literally pot in, I would say every 15 minutes, a big pot, loose ground bait, and away from the bank. So I'm actually fishing there, but I'm actually putting the ground bait in about a foot away from the bank, because it doesn't drop off this lake very much. If I was fishing on a real tight shelf, I'd probably have to pot in sort of right there and fish on it. But I'm potting in there, but I'm actually fishing here. Just to, try and avoid foul hookers, which is the biggest problem nowadays down the edge, because these fish are proper educated. But I'm fishing at the moment. I just got a simple bulk, 6 inches from the hook. And the best bait by far is either a piece of corn or a whole worm. So I just hook the worm through the head, nip its tail off, about 1 inch of its tail off, like that. Big baits, and then I'm actually just shipping it out. Sort of drop the worm where you put the bait in, but bring your float right into the bank, because it goes straight down. If I could fish in shallower water, I'd probably be better today, but that's what the biggest problem is to fishing down the edge. A lot of places you go, you can't always fish in shallow water. And that's why I've set up this rig for fishing off the bottom as well. It's huge for me. It's massive. People don't realise it. Because you're down the edge fishing, you can't catch off. You can't catch off the bottom. You can. It's no different if you were fishing over to an island and you were getting problems with, keeping the fish down. There we go. Straight in. Whole dendra. Bringing it up to the shelf. It's only a small fish this time. If you put maggots on, I've caught some roach as well. Not right. I had fish in me peg earlier, and they wouldn't take the hook. They wouldn't take the hook bait. And I've been to loads of venues. That's why you need that little selection of hook baits. Your dead maggots, your corn, a few worms, and normally one of those baits stand out. It's only a small fish. Caught quite a lot of these, to be honest, but I've had some fish up to sort of £10. Look at that. Todber Manor. It's got a fantastic shop on site as well at Todber Manor. Massive shop, got everything you want. All the baits. Just chuck that piece of worm away. Get another big dendra. So not chopping no worms up, just putting them on the hook. Just hook it through the head, nip that tail off, which stops it from coiling up over the hook. So that was literally just after I potted in. I said, just drop that in where you fed your ground bait and just pull it in to the shelf. So where I'm actually fishing, there's not really much bait, or there's a tail pattern there. And that's what you've got to try and avoid, is trying to stop foul looking. Sometimes they're really difficult, and that's when you pick up that shallow rig. But at the moment, just fishing a real big hook bait like a whole worm is dead. They're not doing nothing, just dropping the rig straight down, little bulk, being nice and patient. Little liner then. There we go. Little perch. It's amazing that you can have them carp in your peg and you get a little fish like a perch. I'm not going to put him in the net. They're really crafty. Some of the venues I go to down the edge now, they're really, really crafty. If I get lots of indications I can't get them on the hook, that's the time to pick that shallow, the rig that I've set up for off the bottom. You might have a few fish on the bottom, when you get a few tail patterns. Oh, look at that. Might be the liner, I'm not too sure. And that's the time to pick up that shallow rig. You'll have the ones on the bottom which are sort of digging into the bottom, eating your bait, but you've got other ones then that are just milling around by the side of them fish, and they're the ones, and sometimes they're the biggest fish. They're the wise ones. But just definitely cutting down on those particle baits, I think's made a big difference. There's lots of ground bait there, and there's like your hook bait. It's like if you were fishing a method feeder, you've got your micros, your ground bait, and you've got your hook bait. And that's what seems to be best today. If you put lots of particles in, it seems like they're more difficult to catch. So cutting the particles out is definitely right at the moment. It can change, obviously, but at the moment, definitely just putting ground bait in. There we go, tiny little bite. You're always going to get a few liners and stuff. That's down the edge fishing, especially when you've got sort of like 2.5 foot like I've got. You've got to put up with that. That's fishing down the edge. But the art of it is not to foul look them. Another little one this time. Beautiful fish though. Not a match to 14 hollow. Look at that, great big dendra. Seen a few tail patterns done. I'm just going to try my other rig, which is fishing off the bottom, but I'm going to put another ball of ground bait in first, or another pot of ground bait. So I'm just going to put 3/4 of a pot in and just have a go on that rig off the bottom, because it can actually be quicker. So away from the bank. Right, so just pick my shallow rig up. I'm still putting that ground bait in, obviously to get the fish in me peg. But the ones I've caught off the bottom are the big ones, the big wise ones that are coming in off the bottom. You know, they're crafty. You've probably got a couple of fish on the bottom wafting the ground bait around, and all of a sudden they go. It's just like you get a couple, they go, and then that's the time to feed again. So just try and make a little bit of noise. You wouldn't think there was one there, and then wallop. You can always tap your rig if you're allowed. You can always tap your pole on the surface. It's no different, like I said earlier, it's no different to fishing up against an island. If you were getting problems with foul looking fish, the first thing you would do is come off the bottom and start fishing shallow. But I'm not fishing sort of, you know, really shallow. I'm only fishing sort of 6 inches off the deck. But you've still got to put that ground bait in to get the fish in. It's like now, you just know, nothing happening, I've got to put some more bait in. And it's amazing some days how much ground bait you've got to put in to keep the fish in your peg. Other days, if they're, you know, other days you can feed like 2 or 3 pots and you can catch on it for ages. So away from the bank again. Go back in on that off the bottom rig. And just flick it in like that. A little bit of noise. I'm feeding away from that bank to try and stop the fish coming right up against the bank, because I can't get in the right depth of water today on this peg. If I could get into like, oh, look at how I just spooked that one, and you wouldn't think that was there. If I could get into like a foot of water, I think I could just feed and fish right in it, but I can't today, not on this peg. It's quite deep. This is the shallowest water on this peg I can actually get into. So away from the bank, try and keep the fish away from the bank, which definitely helps, you know, stop foul looking fish and let them sort of work into the shelf where there's only your hook bait. And you can do this with maggots, you can do it with, you know, all sorts of different baits, but you need that ground bait to get them in the area. There's one now with a big tail outlet. I mean, that's the biggest thing. You get a lot of people saying, oh, I've had all these tails out, I couldn't catch one, I kept foul looking. So you just try and flick that in like that. That's the score with it. Oh, this one's not happy. Oh dear. More pole required, I think. So that was off the bottom. And these big things, they ain't stupid, they've seen it all before. And you've got to work at it, you know, use your ground bait to get the fish in your peg, and then work out on the day. I mean, all well and good when you can catch them on the bottom, but these big wise things, they come in, they're probably sat above the fish that are feeding, heavily on the bottom. So I mean, this is why you want some proper gear on. Lovely, lovely big common. That's the ones we want. Absolutely mental in this lake, honestly. Fight like mad. Get the hook out. So that's yours, 6 inches off the bottom. I'll try and hold him up if I can. These are the wise ones. They're really difficult to catch on the day. You know, doing something a bit different. 6 inches off the bottom, bit of corn or whatever bait you decide really, but just try off the bottom. You can catch a load of these fish. Ooh, it's getting back. Well, I'm going to call this the last fish. It's been absolutely fantastic at Todber today on Whitepost Lakes. I've fed loads of ground bait. I've probably fed 2 of them full up, but with not a lot of particles in. Definitely felt this morning putting them particles in today anyway, maybe a different day next time, but today it was basically put loads of ground bait in. If I had problems of like getting them in my peg and I couldn't catch, that was the time to pick that rig up, which was like 6 inches off the bottom, keep flicking it in with a piece of corn on. Corn or worms have been the bait, to be honest. Maggots, I just felt, I've had a few roach problems as well. But that's been the average stamp today. I've had some right cracking, like double figured fish. But these things, they will absolutely mop the bait up. I've had a great day at Todber. I hope you picked up some tips on how I fish down the edge with ground bait. And get down to Todber. It's an absolutely fantastic fishery.